Hello, Antoine. How are you?
Hi, Remy. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. So I'm assuming we're both based in Montreal.
Yes, I'm in Montreal as well. Yes.
Yes, it's a cold. It's been a cold week.
Yes, I have to say I enjoy it.
Ah,
A lot of people don't, but I like the winter.
ah. It's been long. It's been honestly this week has been really long.
hmm
Yeah, I'm going back to the routine.
Yeah, it's we just finished the winter vacation and now we started right with this cold weather, so
Yes,
to
yes,
keep you alert.
yes, yes. Tough week. So I want to thank you so much for doing this with me, for coming on my channel today. I actually found a lot about you through YouTube and a bunch of Instagram lives that I have watched, and I know we have one common passion, which is learning languages and teaching languages to other people. And I want to start off by you, first of all, telling us who you are and what you do.
hmm So this is the part I hate the most because who I am is a bit complicated. I like to tell people I'm a TCK, so I don't know if you've heard of that term, third culture kid. So I grew up with many cultures, many languages around me, and so I grew up in Vancouver on the west coast of Canada with a French Canadian mother and an Ethiopian father. And I grew up bilingual French and English, and I started other languages quite young. So I started Spanish at 13, and that was I guess the door into the world of language learning in general. So after Spanish, I started learning a bunch of other languages. So I got hooked on languages, and yeah. So I guess my upbringing shaped the way I see the world today as well, and my passion for languages also sort of stemmed from my passion for geography at first. So that was my first, I would say, I don't know, motivation was I really enjoyed learning about the geography of this world and realized
Mhm.
that to understand the geography of the world, it's good to also be able to communicate with the rest of the world.
Yes, yes. So the first question I ask you is about who you are. So I'm also a TCK. I'm also a third culture kid.
hmm
And I talk vastly about this. And I also don't like the question, which is, where are you from? Because I never know what to answer. So I could totally relate with you.
Yes, because
And
I also live in Montreal now, like we said before. So I was born in Montreal. I grew up in Vancouver. Now I live in Montreal again. It's been 10 years now that I've been living here. So where am I from? Am I gonna say the city I'm born in, the city I grew up in? And then sometimes people just want to know your ethnic background. And I'm like, if
yeah,
that's what you want to know, just ask me, oh, I'm curious, what's your ethnic background? It's not the same.
yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. We're on the same boat. So I know you speak many languages and you are a polyglot. So tell us what languages you speak. All of that.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I'll go in order of fluency. I always do that. So yeah, French and English, both my native languages. Then came Spanish, and then Portuguese, Danish, Italian, Catalan. I think that those are the ones that I can actually hold a conversation in. I've studied other languages too, but I can't really hold a conversation in them, so I'm not gonna name them. But yeah, those are the main languages.
So do you just have conversation or can you actually read and write?
Okay, well, I said conversations. It's more than that. Yeah, I'm fluent in all skills, so reading, writing, speaking, and listening in all of those languages, except Catalan and Italian. I think my Italian still needs some tweaking. I've been working on it, and Catalan is a bit more it's a younger language for me, so I can't say that I'm fluent in that one. But yeah, French, English, Spanish, Portuguese, Danish. Um, I would consider myself fluent in all skills, and Italian is I'm getting there, and Catalan. I think you might know this already or me, but it's hard to kind of tell people my level sometimes because
Mm-hmm.
on a passive um, on a passive level, I guess, or passive skills, Like my Catalan, I understand 90%, like because of all the Latin languages I've already learned.
Right.
And Catalan is very easy to understand, and I consume a lot of content with, I don't even need subtitles, and I've only been studying it for a year. But if I have to speak with the proper grammatical structure and without making mistakes, so like the accuracy is not necessarily there yet, but yeah, that's a work in progress, like with anything. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you do to keep all of these languages alive? Because it's a lot, and none of them are easy.
It is a lot, and I always try to include these languages into like my daily activities so that it's not like time spent just focusing on this language, but I'm, multitasking with the language. So, for example, most of the music I listen to is in Danish, so that's really good for like me to like always have Danish in the background, always listening to some vocab in Danish. And people don't realize it. Even just listening to a song many times, eventually you kind of just maybe realize, oh, this word means this. I didn't know what it meant before, and now I think I understood. So I listen to a lot of music in languages, and Danish is one of them. I think I listen to a lot of music in Danish for two reasons. The first reason is I just really love the music that they produce in Denmark. They have great music. But the second one too is that it is one of those languages I have to force myself to be a bit like more surrounded by, not, I mean, in Denmark, but outside of Denmark. How can I create an immersion? And obviously, I think you know this, in Montreal, there's not much of a Danish-speaking community. So I think that's also why it's always there, like the Danish is always there. And I also do language exchanges once a week. So I have a Danish language exchange, so Danish-French once a week. I've been doing this for maybe 6-7 years. And I've been doing the same thing for Italian. For a lot of languages, I did this. Some languages, it's more like I'm actively learning it, so I'm doing this exchange as a way to actually learn right now. Like Catalan, I'm also doing an exchange right now, Catalan English, and that's more like I'm learning the language and getting more fluent. But other languages like Danish, I'm pretty fluent, but it's to maintain the level and keep acquiring new vocab. So yeah, language exchanges have been a really big part of my language learning process. And I think that it's a good thing that in my case, I'm not so shy when it comes to making mistakes, or if I don't always speak properly, I don't really care. So I just kind of, just put myself out there, and I know that with time, my language skills get much better. So language learning has been a lot like of conversations. Music, movies and series are a big part of it too. I really love using that as a tool as well. And obviously I do the boring stuff. Like I do have some textbooks, I do have some exercise books. Some of them a little bit more interesting than others, but obviously there has to be some more traditional stuff too.
Yeah. Where do you do your language exchange? Is there a website?
So actually I started using apps there's two apps that I use. So there's Tandem and HelloTalk.
Yeah.
And so that was usually the way I would meet people. And then after that, we would move on to like maybe using Skype or Google Meet or Zoom to have our language exchange on video call. But at least for the written exchanges, it's mostly on those two apps, or after on other social media. And Instagram is, I think you might know this, a really great way to find other language learners and people that are interested in languages too. So yeah.
Yes, definitely. And I know those two apps as well. I don't use them personally, but I heard about them by watching videos of other people learning or teaching languages. So I'm pretty much aware of it. Yes. My next question is, because I think you basically are a language coach. You teach people how to speak French. Am I correct?
Yeah, so the main language is French. Like 80%, 90% of my student base is French learners. I do teach English and Spanish as well, but it's more of a once in a while kind of thing. So French to immigrants coming to Quebec or already living in Quebec is usually who I teach to, and Yeah, it's the intermediate and advanced level usually as well, or at least conversational as soon as they're conversational. So I don't really teach to people that have zero knowledge. I've done it in the
Mm-hmm.
past, but I realized that I'm more passionate about teaching to people like because obviously I have a passion for the conversational aspect of language too. So I think that that's also what I like to transmit to people is getting them um, getting them speaking.
Yes, yes. And how, like, where do you teach? Is this virtual? Do you have in-person classes? Like, how does this work?
Yeah, so it's on Google Meet. It's my own business. So I've been doing this for, oh my God, I don't know, 5, 6 years maybe. Yeah, so it's on Google Meet. I do one-on-one and I do groups as well. And yeah, it's been quite an adventure being an entrepreneur. I didn't know anything about entrepreneuring before I started this adventure, so
Mm-hmm.
still have lots to learn, but it's been really great, and my students are wonderful.
Is this French Quebecois that you teach or French, like
I like this
standard
question
French?
for me. I like it because I do receive this question quite often. So obviously, when it comes to like more of a lower level, like let's say I don't know, lower beginner, not lower beginner, sorry, lower intermediate, there's going to be less Quebecois expressions, or the more you advance, the more you get exposed to like informal speech, expression, slang. But obviously, my native accent is the Quebecois variant of French, so I always have my natural accent. I don't change my accent or pronunciation. But depending on the goals of the student too, like I might teach them more business French if it is more for work. And I always tell my students when it comes to business French or university like academic French, even though we do have a different accent, it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be like that big of a difference. It's really more when you come into like informal speech and everyday language, which is also very important to learn, obviously, to make friends, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or to speak with coworkers, to meet I don't know, people. Sometimes they have a spouse that is from here, and then they want to understand their family. That's locals. So yeah, there's obviously a big aspect of it is also getting people engaged with the local variety and expressions, especially with my advanced groups. We talk a lot about those expressions, and a lot of them actually, a lot of my students, they already have a lot of specifically Quebecois vocabulary because, as I mentioned, maybe their spouse is from here, maybe they have a really good friend that has that's a native French speaker from here as well. So
Mm-hmm.
so they already have like this exposure, and I kind of just make sure that um, they learn even more.
Yeah. So you have, I'm assuming, one-to-one lessons and then you have group lessons, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And you have them on a weekly basis.
So actually, it depends. Like some students do twice a week, some students do once a week. So depending on how intensive they want the learning to be.
Uh-huh. Is there a specific strategy that you use to teach or not? Or it's just based on like their levels and their needs?
Yeah. So when it comes to one-on-one, it's really
Customize.
customized. So really tailored to their needs because so many people have different needs, and I think that it's for me. I realized I don't see it as the ideal situation having this one structure or syllabus that you use for everyone because some people don't have the same interests, or some people have more of a business French need. Some people it's more like I just want to connect with my spouse's family. So yeah, very personalized. When it comes to the groups, that's a little bit more of there's a specific way that I do things. So it's really conversation based, and we have basically different topics each time. So we choose together, like we decide as a group. So depending on the group, there's going to be different topics that are going to be interesting for the different people that are going to participate. So I ask everyone to kind of choose the topics together. Okay, which topic are we going to talk about every time? So
Mm-hmm.
it's 10 sessions for the groups, and then so the 10 sessions are 10 different topics. And so that way we have an idea of like, okay, what are we going to talk about? I might send them some resources before if they need to like brush up on the vocabulary on the specific topic. and I always send them an overview of the class after, so they can review their mistakes or new vocab. And yeah, so that is this specific structure, but at the same time, there's a lot of there's a lot of room for, how can I explain it? There's a lot of room for changes, or it's quite flexible because okay, we have a topic, but then during the conversation, the different types of questions or comments that the students are going to make is going to really depend. It's going to really depend on them.
It's more based on how the conversation naturally develops.
Yeah, exactly. So we have like a conversation starter, and then the conversation goes in the direction that the students want it to go. And I'm a moderator. I tell my students with the groups, it's like, I'm not really here to just be this teacher that teaches you this grammar rule. I'm here to like moderate the conversation, make sure everyone has the time to practice their language, their speaking skills, or the spoken French, because that's the point of the group lessons. Is maybe I understand perfectly, but sometimes people have they're blocked when they want to speak. So,
yeah, gotcha. And how long are these session? Like one session, how long is it? It's an hour, 2 hours?
It's an hour and a half for the groups and an hour for the individual sessions. I find for one-on-one, it's more than an hour is exhausting for both me and the students. For the 90 minutes, when it comes to groups, it's because we're a lot of people, so it's to really let people, give the chance to every single student, for them to be able to actually use the language or participate and speak, not just be listening. I did try to do 1 hour ones before in the past, and I quickly understood that it wasn't enough. I quickly understood that if we're 5 or 6 students and I'm the 7th person, let's say, as the teacher, some students are going to be like, I only spoke 10 minutes or 5 minutes. So 90 minutes works well for that.
Yeah, definitely. So I do have one more question before we go, and we almost approached the end of the interview. And you spoke about, having an interest for movies, music, and I know that you also like poetry. And so my question is, how do these creative pursuits contribute to your language practice?
Yes, I love this question because I love poetry. So I think that with any hobby, passion that we have, it's easy to apply that into the language learning process. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They don't necessarily do that. Let's say if someone likes poetry, they might do poetry in their native language, and then they do their language learning as a separate thing. For me, I quickly understood at a young age that I could mix those two things together. And honestly, the truth of the matter is that English for me was very difficult. English class was very difficult for me when I was in elementary. So I went to a fully French school in Vancouver. So Vancouver is an English-speaking city, but I went to a francophone school, and so basically every class was in French except English class. But we only started English when I was 9, so in 4th grade. And English, because of the crazy spelling, not really corresponding to the pronunciation of words, I had a lot of trouble with spelling tests. That's how we started English. It was a lot of spelling tests. I also had a lot of trouble with, I think, punctuation. There's just a lot of things that, because there wasn't the same punctuation rules as French. So even though I was already fluent and a native speaker of English, my written and academic English was really poor at the beginning, and I was really good at French, but when I started English, it was a disaster. So, but the one thing that kept me motivated is that when we had to do some poetry, when we had poetry exercises or homework, I was really excelling, and then my English teacher at the time saw that, oh, this is your potential, your way to maybe have a breakthrough with English and kind of not stay in this feeling of being stuck with English. And so she's like, yeah, you're gonna be a future poet. I'm not a published poet or anything, but it's really funny because she said this, and then even in French class when I was in elementary, they're like, oh, you're gonna write poetry, and it is true that to this day now I still write a lot of poetry, and so I write poetry in English, in French, but also in Danish, in Spanish sometimes, in Portuguese, mostly French, English, and in Danish. And Danish is a sort of the truth of the matter is that with Danish, it was a very specific reason that I chose that language. Is that at first I didn't want my poetry to be read by other people. I wanted it to be like sort of like a diary. So I thought, oh, if I write it in Danish here in Montreal or in Canada in general, nobody will understand my poems if they find them. So that's how I started with writing them in Danish, and it just became a habit. And now I'm like, I've done a few open mics, so now I'm comfortable sharing my poetry with others. But yeah, that was my story with poetry.
Ah, that's a nice way to learn a language. Like I think it's a great way. And talking about journaling, there's this girl. I think her name is Joe, I think, on Instagram and on
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah,
And
yeah, I know.
I've attended some of her sessions, especially journaling sessions. And there was one about
Oh.
like journaling in different languages, and she speaks about how like if you want to achieve a goal, you should start journaling in the language that you're learning. So I feel it's pretty useful because it forces you to actually write. The only thing is that you don't have anyone to actually correct it to you, but I think it forces you to like research some words if you want to use a specific thing. So I think whatever you just shared is a great way to learn a
Absolutely,
language.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And like I think journaling, for me, I learned that journaling my approach to journaling is writing poetry or prose. So I never really wrote like journaling like the typical, just like, oh, today I did this, and then I came back from there, and then it was a great day. So obviously, I think not everybody does that, but I think when people think of journaling, they might assume it's just like talking about your day. But for me, it's always been a more creative process. So yeah, I do a lot of journaling in my own way. And yeah, right now, because Catalan is my focus, I write a lot of Catalan poetry and prose. More prose because before you're advanced enough, it's easier to write prose than poetry, I find. Yeah, I find it's a really great way because as we talked about before, you asked me if I was able to do like more than just conversation, if I was able to do the other skills. So I think that for me, the goal has always been when I start a language to be able to acquire every skill. And obviously, if I don't need to write, if I'm not at school, for example, taking a course in a language, how am I going to have the opportunity to write? So I think journaling or writing poetry is a great way to make sure that, I'm also learning how to write the language.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, wonderful. Well, Antoine, thank you so much for doing this. Before I let you go, I do have some rapid fire questions for you. I want you to give me the answer, like whatever comes to your mind, just say it. I don't need you to elaborate. It's supposed to be rapid for that reason, okay?
Okay.
So the first question is, you spoke about winter before. What is your favorite winter activity?
Ice skating.
Are you a coffee or tea person?
Tea. I have it in my hand.
You're the second person telling me tea today. I'm like, what? No one likes coffee? Your favorite mantra?
Favorite mantra? Oh my God, I'm sorry, I don't have one right now, but I think that if I had to try to make one up right now, I would say to make every day, to just make every day worth it, and find the beauty in everyday things. Yeah.
Lovely. Last question. One word that describes your drive right now.
That describes my what, sorry?
Your drive, like your motivation.
I think it's just passion. It's always been passion. So I always, as long as I'm following my passion, I know that I'll have the drive. If I do things that I find tedious, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Well, Antoine, thank you so much. Before we go, do you want to tell us how people can reach out to you?
Sure. So I'm mostly active on Instagram at polyglotting _ with Antoine. And I also have a Patreon for those of you who are interested in my exclusive content. And that's also polyglotting with Antoine without the underscores. So yeah, polyglotting, just like polyglot with 2 T's, ing. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I will put everything in the description below so people can reach out to you. And once again, thank you for doing this.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Urmi.